Hey there, kids. I'm back with the milk. What did I miss? Hi there. I'm Haruka. In all seriousness, I've been incredibly busy with school, writing, and another extra thing that I'm really excited about that's going to take about a year to see if it'll even work out. I'll see if I can pump out some more content for the beginning of the year. I know I owe you a season preview, so I'll make sure to beef up my yearly recap to make up for that, because this is actually a very good anime season going on right now. But right now, it's time for football. Josh Fields is finally looking more comfortable. No, we got the 2022 FIFA World Cup coming up, and I'm going to try to introduce you to all the storylines going into this one. This is going to take way too much time. I should also apologize for the minimalist editing that this is. It is like, I'm recording this on Thursday, and you're going to be seeing this either Friday or Saturday. So first of all, I do have to get into the disclaimers about the tournament. I'm not going to ignore everything going on with this World Cup. You may go into other World Cup previews that will ignore everything and stick to sports, but it's important to recognize that sports have always been political. And that same sort of phrasing essentially allows the normalization of countries and corporations sports washing their brands. Elsewhere in soccer, you can probably point to the Saudi acquisition of Newcastle very closely after an investigation found the acting leader of the country had directly ordered for the extrajudicial killing of a journalist. And I think that a lot of people don't even think about the way that the NFL right now is receiving billions of dollars for advertising the US military, who, you know what, there's way too many problems here to get into. Point being, this is all part of the storyline. This is all part of the context in which this tournament is being held, so pay attention. First, the selection process involving Qatar has been highly criticized. Along with Russia's 2018 tournament, the entire selection process has been flagged with fraud all over. There have been internal investigations at FIFA that have found nothing. Meanwhile, there have been investigations made by the US Department of Justice and Swiss federal prosecutors that show the opposite. They even arrested a bunch of people back in 2015. Second, there's the treatment of migrant workers in the construction of the necessary stadia. In order to fill the demand for work in the country, Qatar looked to hire migrant workers to build all the stadiums, because they didn't even have a single stadium in the entire country that was even close to being able to handle a large-scale international tournament. Many of these workers were from South Asia. There have been reports that workers were lied to about wages, but were unable to return home when they arrived because the contracting companies took away their passports, or they had to pay heavy fees in order to go back and cancel their contract. Basically, they were made into slave laborers. The working conditions were also horrifying. Safety wasn't a real big concern, and a report from The Guardian last year said that over 6,500 workers died at that point. Qatar themselves say that those were due to unrelated illnesses, you know, the kind that make it so a healthy 20-something-year-old dies of heart failure. Third, there's the move of this World Cup from the summer to winter due to the inhospitable climate found in Qatar. So I want you to check a map for where Qatar is. It honestly took me a while. I know the general area, but couldn't find the specific spot. It kind of looks like Michigan poking out from the bottom of Saudi Arabia. Anyway, that's just all desert, straight up. The average low temperature there in July, when the World Cup is traditionally played, is 88 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the low. The high is more around 108. So in an attempt to keep this thing going, they moved the tournament from what is usually the off-season for everyone and just sort of plopped it down in the middle of everyone's club seasons, meaning literally all of the soccer world is getting fucked by this. Not just international teams who will have less time to prepare. We've already seen some players go out with fairly minor injuries but have to pull out from the World Cup because a couple of weeks is all you need to miss the whole thing. Finally, we just got your standard name brand civic rights issues. I mentioned the whole issue of migrant workers not even being considered humans, let alone citizens. Women can be locked up for up to 7 years if they have sex outside of marriage, even in cases of rape. And literally just the other week, one of the tournament's biggest ambassadors straight up called being gay an illness. By the way, it is literally illegal to be a gay man, just to be one, with the punishment being up to 3 years if you are caught or like someone suspects you of it. And if you're Muslim, that's just a death sentence. That is literally what is in their laws. But there's apparently nothing in the law about lesbians. I just found that weirdly both specific and non-specific. Either way, this whole thing is just one big clusterfuck of a scandal. This isn't even the first time the World Cup was used to sports wash a nation, and it's not even the cup you're thinking of. I'm talking about Argentina in 1978. But now that we're done talking about the country, let's get into the teams and start off with the team that they have selected to represent Qatar. Group A, Qatar. Not to be outdone by the government, Qatari sports have been well known for a bit of scandal with those representing the nation. They are the reason why certain restrictions have been added to the one-time FIFA nationality switch over the past couple of decades after they tried to bring in a couple of, Brazilian players and say, hey, they're Qatari now, and they've never even had any sort of relationship to the country before. Currently, they don't have too many guys that are considered out of bounds at the moment. The main guy is Roro, the Portuguese-born center back who first moved to Qatar in 2011 and made his first cap for Qatar in 2016. I'm not going to discount this team completely. They came out of nowhere in the 2019 Asian Cup to win it all, only giving up a single goal the entire tournament, and that was in the final against Japan. And American fans may recognize them from the 2021 Gold Cup where they made it to the semifinals, only to lose to the US. The name you should also know is another foreign-born guy, Almoez Ali, who was born in Sudan, and the United Arab Emirates alleged that he should not have even been eligible to play for Qatar. He is their top goal scorer. Next is Ecuador. Apparently, I didn't write this in the script. This happened just before I started recording. Apparently there's already been allegations that Ecuadorian players have been receiving bribes from Qatar, so that's great. Anyway, let's finally get out of Qatar. Well, you can't leave Qatar in this. Let's stop talking about Qatar and finally move on to Ecuador's surprising qualification. This is their 4th World Cup, actually making out of the group stage back in 2006, mostly thanks to classic choke jobs, Polonia. More on them later. Right before I finally got around to recording, they announced their squad, so I've already got a couple of guys that I was looking at, and they did make the team. Jose Cifuentes from LAFC is, at least to me, one of the best Ecuadorian players out there right now. Solid midfielder, can do a lot both ways, and one of the biggest names out there for Ecuador at the moment, Moises Caicedo, is currently with Brighton, but probably not for long. Senegal, coached by Aliou Cisse, the legendary holding midfielder who was sent off on opening day of the 2002 Premier League season. Senegal is both one of the most successful African nations in the world of soccer, but also not. This is only their 3rd World Cup. They made the quarterfinals back in 2002 thanks to Captain Cisse, Papa Boba Diop, and Henry Camara. Then last time around was not much. They have some key players in defender and captain Kalidou Koulibaly and winger Sadio Mane, who are both seen as incredibly prestigious players. And can't forget about goalkeeper Edouard Mendy, who has not only won Chelsea a Champions League title in 2021, leading to winning the award for best goalkeeper in the world, he also helped Senegal win their first African Cup of Nations. That's right, this team is the reigning champion of their regional tournament. However, all you need to do is check on the European champion to know where that gets you. Italy. Y'all suck. Look, despite Mane's struggles at Bayern recently, you know he's still good and this team has a decent chance of getting out of the group. Netherlands. The Dutch have had some issues in the past few years, but everyone knew that the only problem was Frank de Boer. And now with Louis van Gaal at the helm, they've got their shit together again. The perennial bridesmaids, having reached the semifinals 5 times and the finals thrice, they've never actually won the whole thing, despite at one time having one of the greatest footballers of all time, Johan Cruyff. They've had a complete retool since missing out on the last tournament, and quite a few of the players I'm interested in seeing are fairly new. Like Cody Gakpo, a young striker who Van Gaal literally told not to go to Manchester United for the good of his career, a team that Van Gaal once coached. And midfielder Teun Koopmeiners, an Atalanta guy who just recently scored a hat-trick against Torino last month. I honestly don't think this team is going to be led by stars, but it is a very solid team that's going to be really hard to break defensively. Virgil van Dijk's been having some trouble with Liverpool, but De Vries, De Ligt, Ake, and even Blind have something to give. Group B, England. The English national team is probably one of the stupidest teams on the planet at the moment, and I mean that in both a good and bad way. Gareth Southgate is taking Harry Maguire, one of the biggest mistakes in the history of the Premier League, and I do include Ali Dia on that list, and he took him and Kyle Walker instead of Fikayo Tomori and Tyrone Mings. Then there's the injuries in the defense too that have been ravaging them. I mean, there's some who they actually did call up, there's some that they didn't call up, whatever. The fact that Southgate couldn't just be cool and call up Ivan Toney, who's been absolutely phenomenal this season for Brentford, says a lot. But I mean, Ivan Toney's also been phenomenal at breaking betting laws, so maybe that's why he didn't go. Then we get to the team's actual form, and they've gone from the semifinals in the 2018 World Cup to the finals in the 2020 European Championship to being relegated from the UEFA Nations League a few months back. I wouldn't trust Southgate with anything, but I also have absolutely no clue what this team is going to do anyway. Iran. Iran is one of those teams that looks like they should be good on paper and based on their youth programs, but it just never translates. They've qualified for most of the tournaments from the past 20-something years, but can't get out of their group. Their closest in that time was the last tournament with a win against Morocco and a late draw with Portugal. This is also one of the older teams in the tournament this year, with half of their players 29 and older and only one player below 26. They're missing 21-year-old Alahir Sayad Manesh due to injury. The key men to look out for on this team are striker Sardar Azmoun of Bayer Leverkusen and winger Alireza Jahanbakhsh from Feyenoord. Although, admittedly, this is a rough group for them. United States. A friend of mine said he didn't know what Berhalter was going to do this tournament, but it was going to be stupid and it will get him fired. The lads are back, but were they ever there in the first place? Historically, the USMNT, who I will refer to for the rest of this video as Usmant, Usmant made the semifinals back in 1930, qualified a couple more times, and then were completely missing from the World Cup until 1990, when the US suddenly got into soccer again. And then they lost to Trinidad and Tobago in 2017 to miss out on the 2018 World Cup. So there are people who care. I don't. But I will say that Usmant is looking pretty good going into this tournament with a few solid regional tournament wins in the Gold Cup and Nations League. However, a couple of humiliating friendlies against Japan and Saudi Arabia a couple months ago say otherwise about the quality of this team. In terms of the squad, I genuinely like Valencia starter Yunus Musa, and I just want to showcase a guy who will probably not see the pitch at all. Sean Johnson, he's really earned his way there, and I'm just so happy he's on the plane. He's out of contract, and I don't know if I want him back at the Fire, but let's just let him have his moment at the World Cup. Wales! Wales is weird and fun, and they're what's going to make this group interesting. Their entire footballing history for a century was just a single jaunt to the quarterfinals in 1958 and nothing else until 2016 when they showed up out of nowhere to reach the semifinals of the European Championship. They don't exactly have a brilliant team, but Gareth Bale did just prove earlier in the month that he can still perform even if he doesn't care. Besides, the big thing to talk about here isn't the Welsh squad, but the Welsh narrative. Despite actually having a good record against them, the English fans are actually incredibly worried about Wales and the narrative of this being the weirdest group of death I have ever seen. You got Wales and England, England and the US, and then the US and Iran. All aren't just sporting rivalries, but actual geopolitical rivals at some point in history that have caused wars. Group C, Argentina. Speaking of countries who hate the English, this is Argentina's last chance to get Messi a World Cup win. And I'll level with you, I'm not sure they have the all-around quality to get it. None of their goalkeepers have more than 18 caps despite being over 30. The only player of quality in the midfield to me is Leandro Paredes, and I don't know if I'd trust him anyway. The defense is okay, but not impressive, and I still think Angel Di Maria is a fraud. It doesn't matter if he apparently won them the Copa. I don't care. He's a fraud. I hate him when I get him in FIFA Ultimate Team. I will say they haven't lost a game since 2019. They won the Copa in 2021. It's just, I'm not sure how far they'll go. Saudi Arabia. I'm not going to spend too much time here because there's not really much to say. You know in March Madness where there's that 1/16th seed in the first round that you've never heard of and don't even know where they're from, like Wright State or Robert Morris University? That's the Saudis in the World Cup, but at least I know where they are. They qualify, get in, and get out. They haven't even done well in the Asian Cup recently. I mean, it's just cannon fodder at this point. Mexico. Something is deeply wrong with El Tri. This is a nation that has prided itself in its absolute dominance over the US in this sport. They are winless against Usmant since September 6th, 2019. And they struggled in qualification against Canada, Panama, and were even handed a draw to Guatemala back in April. And if you want a competitive fixture, they drew with Jamaica in the Nations League in June. And you look at the roster they've announced and the sheer uproar at the addition of Rogelio Funes Mori, who is best known for following the example of other great MLS prospects by flaming out with Benfica. He's also known for being in a reality show for MLS. You almost feel bad for any of the prospects that decided to be on this team than, America, who, the dual nationals who chose Mexico over America. I feel almost bad for them. Same as my friend doesn't trust Berhalter and the English don't trust Southgate, I don't think that Mexico should trust Tata, and honestly, it doesn't even look like Tata wants to be there. Poland! My ancestral homeland and somehow the only team where I feel absolutely qualified pronouncing their names, it's good old Polska. There is a legendary saying in Poland that I love to use, which is, first is for points, second is for everything, third is for honor. They just can't get out of the group stage. They did get third place in 1974 and 1982, but this is more about modern history. This team isn't bad. They have a fairly underrated attack, in my opinion. Everyone knows about Big Bob Lewandowski, but Arkadiusz Milik, Krzysztof Piatek, and Karol Swiderski are all solid strikers. And I should also mention Przemysław Frankowski, a former Chicago Fire player that has such an amazing extra gear and one of the highest top speeds in UEFA. He does struggle defensively though, and he gets played as a wingback a lot for some reason. And wow, they were not lying when they said Gaga Slonina would make the World Cup roster, because there is nothing below Szczesny. What even happened to Dragowski? Group D, France. So here's the thing about the defending champs. There is a precedence for what I'm about to say. They won it all at home in 1998 and promptly flamed out of the 2002 tournament. Then, after reaching the finals in 2006 and everything that came with that, they completely imploded in 2010 when personalities clashed and there were even fights on the training pitch. Even Germany has suffered from this with their horrifying performance in 2018 following the dub in 2014. Hell, Spain lost 5-1 in their rematch to the Netherlands that year too, not even making out of the group. There are rumblings around this French side that following their win in 2018, there have been personality issues and conflict within the team, mostly centering around the main man, Kylian Mbappe. Mbappe's kind of gone off the deep end with some stuff at PSG, and there's been a lot of talk about Griezmann's situation at Atletico, but like that's more just like distraction than like personality stuff. Mostly the personality stuff is Mbappe. There are some question marks about this team's focus, and there is an established pattern. I don't think they're favorites. Well, I guess they are if like people all agree they are, but I'm saying that I think there's a very large chance they flame out in the group stage. Australia. I think the only thing I really need to say here is that they got here thanks to two different playoff games. They beat the UAE in the Asian playoff, and they beat Peru in Qatar in a game that ended with a penalty shootout where a Viking-looking man named Redmayne danced around in a fashion that frightened those poor Peruvian players. They've only made it out of the group once in 2006 when Japan scored too early and gave up 3 goals after the 84th minute, all scored by guys off the bench. Oh hey, this is a game between Gus Hiddink and Zico, two guys with some of the weirdest coaching careers I've ever seen. The key here is that they are historically clutch when given the opportunity. Denmark. I was planning on making a video last year about the 2020 Euros because it was one of the more interesting stories I've ever seen, and a big part of that was Denmark. Not historically a big nation, they've caught fire a few times in the past, most notably in the 1992 Euros where they won it all and reaching the quarterfinals in the 1998 World Cup. So this past Euros, they made it to the semifinals after probably the most horrifying thing to happen on a pitch on the world stage when midfielder Christian Eriksen suddenly collapsed and was barely saved thanks to Captain Simon Kjær immediately providing CPR and the help of the medics on hand. And Eriksen's back. He's been medically cleared to play for a while now and looks pretty okay with Manchester United at the moment. The big guy to watch on this team, however, is Yusuf Poulsen, a large man, the absolute giant playing for RB Leipzig. And speaking of playing under protest, the Danish kit suppliers, Hummel, designed a jersey to specifically hide all distinguishing features so as to protest the atrocities that led to this World Cup. You should go look that up. Tunisia. And while England is getting faced with their former colonies, here's Tunisia ready to take advantage of France's potential slump. They make the World Cup fairly consistently, they just don't do much there. They've won a total of 2 games in their history at the World Cup. They won their first ever game against Mexico and their most recent game against Panama. They don't even have a steady record in the African Cup of Nations, winning in 2004 when they were hosting, but mostly just reaching the quarterfinals a lot since then. They qualified thanks to a Malian own goal in the first leg of their final qualifying round. Group E. Spain. Spain are a pretty obvious team normally. They won in South Africa, but they needed a bit of a retool since. Their best guys were retiring, and this past Euros they weren't expecting much. But then they just rocked up with all of their young dudes and made it to the semis. So I kind of like Spain. They're fun. The problem is that they're going all in on that youth concept by leaving behind Sergio Ramos and David De Gea, despite still taking Jordi Alba, Azpilicueta, and Sergio Busquets. I didn't even know Busquets was still playing. Costa Rica. There's some real bias in this, and it's not in the place that you think. You've already heard about how I have no real personal affinity towards Usmant, and I honestly don't care about international soccer in general. But any team that starts Francisco Calvo deserves to lose. every time. Look, I watched Calvo firsthand at the Fire for a while, and I think it's pretty clear that you cannot trust that man. It's like Harry Maguire, except with even less upside. Costa Rica is the only team with a player called up from the American Second Division, which is wild. It is midfielder Daniel Chacon, who is listed with Colorado Rapids too. Anyway, this is a team that is completely on its way out. Everyone is so old and don't have much in the tank anyway. Keylor Navas is 35. Calvo is 30, Waston is 34, Venegas is 33, Joel Campbell is 30. They also dragged out Brian Ruiz again, who is 37. The guy's first international goal was on July 16, 2005. That goal is getting ready to graduate high school. They're old, they have Calvo. I'll be honest, this is the worst team at the World Cup. Germany. The thing about Germany here is that there's too many unknowns at the moment. They have a very good squad, a solid mix of veterans and guys with a lot to prove, but there's just not enough trust yet in Hansi Flick. Knockout round exit in the Euros is a whole lot better than what they did in Russia. They lost to Mexico, but that's still just not really promising. Germany is known for their defense and will likely see Ginter, Rudiger, Süle, and Kerr all in the conversation on that back line. They got a good midfield with Ilkay Gundogan performing well for his club and guys like Kimmich, Goretzka, and Musiala really finding a place for themselves. The issue is at striker, where they haven't had a true answer at the tip of the spear. They've brought on Werder Bremen striker Niklas Füllkrug, who my friend is a big fan of, and has already scored 10 goals on the campaign for the newly promoted side. And he scored 19 in the second division last year, but I mean, you know, there's a lot of people who can score almost 20 goals in the second division. Japan. Finally in this group, I feel so bad for them, but it's the team for all of my weebs in the audience, the Samurai Blue. They really can't get out. I just don't see a chance for them. It's even more concerning considering that they're not even calling up the man who should be their best chance at a goal scorer, Kyogo Furuhashi. In fact, I do want to go into the selection a bit, at least. Japan has a good shot at something, you know, in the next tournament. They have a bunch of really good guys just about to hit their prime. The striker they did take, Asano Takuma, is still very good as well. Japan's stature in the game has absolutely grown around the same pace as America's, maybe even better. Look out for Ritsu Doan, Daichi Kamada. I said that in such a Chicago accent. Hey, look out for Daichi Kamada, Takumi Minamino, and Takafusa Kubo. Also, while they didn't take Furuhashi to the tournament, Daisen Maeda will still be repping the group of lads at Celtic. Group F, Belgium. You want to talk about last chances? This is a team trying to use their one last chance. For those unfamiliar, there's this thing in soccer known as a golden generation, when a country that normally doesn't produce many good players somehow produces a lot of good players in a small age group. For Belgium, this is Thibaut Courtois, Toby Alderweireld, Jean Vertonghen, Axel Witsel, Kevin De Bruyne, Romelu Lukaku, Eden Hazard, Thorgan Hazard, Andreas Martins. This is a team that was the top of the FIFA World Rankings in 2015, despite not actually winning anything. This is make or break for the Red Devils. Wow, I did not know that that was for them to say. Most of them still play at a high level, but Vertonghen and Alderweireld should be retired already, so that takes out their defense. And while I like Lukaku, he struggled on the club side for a while. Canada! We've finally gotten to my bias here in this tournament. I am all on board for Canada. This is actually their second time to ever qualify. Their first was in 1986 when they lost every game without scoring a single goal. But I said on my podcast last year that Canada would finish top of qualifying in CONCACAF, and they did, with an incredibly clutch win at home in Edmonton, where they took advantage of the previously mentioned weird Mexico team to win Azteca. People don't think about how good this team actually is. Alphonso Davies has gone from Vancouver to being one of the premier wide players in the world, and Richie Laryea is one of the most underrated right backs in this hemisphere. That's the nicest thing I've ever said about a fullback other than Mike Alstott. We don't really talk about Kyle Larin now that he's not in MLS, but he can still mash, and I know Tajon Buchanan can do it too. I scouted him in college. Jonathan David is a starter at Lille, and then there's Milan Borjan, who is the uncontested starter for one of the toughest teams in the world, Red Star Belgrade. Have I mentioned that they were forced into playing an extra qualifying round? Most of these teams were seeded in their qualification, but Canada was forced to actually play against a bunch of those small Caribbean nations that make up the majority of CONCACAF in a round of qualifying that's supposed to be for the honor of being the scrub that Mexico and the others wipe the floor with. These guys overcame all of that. With glowing hearts we say they rise the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Morocco. So Morocco got here by pounding D-Rock in the final round of qualifying for Africa. They didn't qualify for a solid period of time since the start of the 21st century, but they did make it back last time around. The last time they were really relevant in any tournament was in the 80s, except losing to Tunisia in the 2004 Cup of Nations. The biggest thing to mention with this team is that the coach who got them qualified last year, Vahid Halilhodžić, was fired this year because he straight up stopped calling up Chelsea winger Hakim Ziyech because of unprofessional conduct. Basically, Ziyech had allegedly feigned an injury to avoid a call-up, so Halilhodžić was understandably pissed. But Ziyech has more sway with the Fed than the coach, and he was replaced with Walid Regragui. Anyway, I mentioned Ziyech. The other name you should know is Achraf Hakimi, who is a fullback. And you should also look out for forward Youssef En-Nesyri, who's got a lot of international goals for a fairly young age. 25 is young, right? Right? Please, Sam, right? Croatia. Well, it's Croatia that's going to be asking if 30 is still young. I mentioned Belgium going in for the last shot, but this is technically also that for Croatia. But unfortunately, all of those best guys aren't really playing at high enough levels anymore. The 37-year-old Luka Modric refuses to age, but Dejan Lovren and Ivan Perisic just aren't the same guys anymore. Andrej Kramaric might do something. Mateo Kovacic might try something from outside the box, but this is a team that is past its prime. Much like their World Cup final appearance last time around, they had a pretty easy route to get here, and I don't think they have that same easy out here. Group G, Brazil. I feel like I should have a stronger opinion about Brazil, but I really just don't know right now. They haven't lost a game to a team not named Argentina since the 2019 September friendly against Peru, but at the same time, they've lost twice in that time, both to Argentina, and both were in Cup finals. Well, one was a made-up thing for their rivalry, but the other was in the final of Copa America. I guess what I'm saying is that I don't think Brazil have it right now. They have a great team. They went undefeated in qualifying. Neymar is playing mad and it's working. They don't have much of a midfield, but I could say that Casemiro and Fred are enough, seeing as they've really turned it around at United for the past few months. And while not known for their defense, Thiago Silva is still playing well and Marquinhos is a solid player. Maybe I just don't want them to have it easy, but I really don't think they have that bonus factor in them when they hit the KOs. They'll need to absolutely rush their opponents, but I think that if they give any sort of an inch, they will be taken advantage of. Serbia. This team is finally the product of the U19 World Cup winning squad that has gotten Veljko Paunovic a free pass to continue failing upwards in the soccer world. How is he the boss at Chivas now? Talking about Serbian history is complicated, but they did do pretty well back when they were Yugoslavia. Unfortunately, they haven't really gotten out of the group stage since the band broke up. Wow, Haruka, real light way of putting ethnic cleansing. Anyway, my point is that they're pretty much the Saudi Arabia of Europe when it comes to being in the World Cup. Usually it's in and out. They haven't even qualified for the Euros since 2000. Thing is, when you look at it, they kind of bang right now. Guys like Andrija Zivkovic and Sasa Lukic are finally getting going. There's actually a bit of an argument on whether to start Aleksandar Mitrovic or Dusan Vlahovic up top for this team. And you can't forget Dusan Tadic, who is still a top player in Europe. If there was any time for them to show up out of nowhere, this is it. Switzerland. Speaking of complicated Balkan history, here's a team made up of a lot of ethnic Kosovar Albanians. This isn't even like a random thing. There was this big thing at the last World Cup where these two teams got put in the same group, and both Xherdan Shaqiri and Granit Xhaka celebrated their goals with some very specific gestures. Also, Brazil was in the group, so that's another weird thing. Anyway, yeah, Shaqiri is the power cube. He will finally awaken from the slumber he was apparently in with the Chicago Fire and show up for the natty because that's what he always does. The amount of times that he has saved Switzerland late in an important game is crazy. He is 10 caps away from being the most capped player and is tied for the 6th most goals for Switzerland of all time. They do fine, they usually do, because of that incredibly clutch aspect that doesn't just come from him, but from Xhaka, Breel Embolo, and goalkeeper Jan Sommer. If you put them in a corner, they will usually find their way out. Cameroon. The only new team in this group, they're also a team with some of the most random World Cup history. In 1990, they just sort of hacked and slashed their way to the quarterfinals, led by a 38-year-old man who was playing soccer in a small island nation off the coast of Madagascar, who also just so happened to be the creator of the goal celebration. Roger Milla is wild. The problem is that they haven't been much in recent history. Andre Onana is a pretty damn good goalkeeper, but there's only so much a goalkeeper can do for you. They've won the Cup of Nations in 2017 and made 3rd place when they hosted last year, but to be fair, the African Cup of Nations is even more CONCACAF than CONCACAF. If you want a field player to look out for, I'll give you Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, who is still playing for Munich for his part. And I guess Andre Frank Zambo Anguissa, who is a decent player on a Napoli team that is tearing it up right now. He got a brace at the start of October and a Champions League goal at the start of September. Group H, Portugal. The funny thing about Portugal is that they always do really well in the Euros, then they get humiliated at the World Cup. They didn't even qualify in the 90s. Anyway, the main thing about Portugal is that they're about to have a real reckoning with Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, I feel compelled to mention that this guy may or may not still have an arrest warrant out for him in the United States for sexual assault. But on the soccer end, he also has problems because he's basically eating up the scenery. I feel so bad for Joao Felix because he was supposed to be this next big thing that was going to get a chance to show off, and instead he's benched at his club for an old Antoine Griezmann, and it looks like he's being benched for his country for an old Ronaldo. And the thing is, Ronaldo's form is terrible, and he's lashing out at his club right now, and is generally being a poopy pants, which will probably mess with his relationship to a couple of teammates on the squad who are also at United. There's a lot of people trying to make this World Cup out to be Ronaldo's last chance, but I'm not even sure if he's going to earn his starting spot. The rest of the squad is actually pretty okay. They have a pretty solid squad when they remove Ronaldo. That's how they actually won their only major competition when they took Ronaldo off the pitch. I'm just wondering why Pepe still has to be here. Ghana. Ghana is the modern African soccer team. Despite not making it last time around, they've made it to the knockouts 2 of the 3 times they've qualified for the World Cup. And they made the semifinals of every single Cup of Nations from 2008 to 2017. The problem is that they went out in the group stage last year. Actually, I might have to take back all of my praise because they freaking lost to Comoros, which is a small island nation to the northwest of Madagascar. Why do I have to keep mentioning Madagascar? I like the penguins though. They still got the AUs, Mohamed Kudus is pretty good, but there's just not much going for them right now. Uruguay, another team that is a bit too old at the moment. Both of their backup goalkeepers have less than 10 caps, with 36-year-old Sebastian Sosa only making a single competitive appearance for his country. Luis Suarez is playing back at home now. Cavani is still out here with Valencia, but I think the only player with real international buzz on this team under 30 is Federico Valverde. Maybe Darwin Núñez, but his stock has fallen off along with Liverpool in general. It's kind of unfortunate because they're really more of a default 3rd or 4th best team in CONMEBOL right now. Colombia and Chile are hitting some hard rough patches right now. Brazil and Argentina are still obviously miles ahead. They made the quarterfinals in the last tournament, which was kind of whatever. And they haven't done much in recent years in the Copa. They won it all in 2011, but they've struggled since. South Korea. I'm real conflicted on Korea right now because I don't know the status of one very important player. Heung-min Son broke his eye socket earlier in the month, and I don't know what the recovery process is supposed to be here. Apparently started training in the old Rip Hamilton mask, which is honestly a vibe if he continues to play the whole tournament with it on. Korea is best known for their controversial run in 2002, but since then they've actually done pretty okay. And much like Japan and Usman, they're getting progressively better as time goes on in terms of, their stature in the soccer world. Son isn't their only guy. There's a few guys on the team I'd be excited about. Hwang Hee-chan, Hwang In-beom, and the young Lee Kang-in are all great attacking pieces. And Napoli is just doing a real good job at just finding random dudes, because that's where this center back Kim Min-jae is playing. But at the end of the day, an exit from the group may rely on Son's fitness. Now for some predictions, and I just want to say, first of all, I am almost done with my vodka here, and second of all, I mostly go for narrative. Like, obviously you're gonna have people like, there's a certain level of like, oh yes, this team is just better than the others, this team is better than this team, but you gotta look at narrative, and I really like narrative, so we're gonna go off of narrative. In the group stage, Group A, Netherlands is just too strong to knock it out of the group. Senegal is just filled with talent right now, so you can't say no to them. I don't think Ecuador has much. I think Qatar may get a dub on them to put them in a respectable 3rd place in the group. So, as I said, Qatar may not need to bribe Ecuador to win that game. Group B, this is a series of strange happenings in the group, but I did the math and I don't know how, but the US ends up on top. It's just something that happens when you solve all of the equations for all of the rivalries in this group. Because like the US hates England, Wales hates England, Iran hates the US, but I don't think Iran actually has the team that can do that. So if Wales and the US beat England, and then the US are going to be first. It's just math. Despite being the actual best team in the group, I mean, I'm not saying that England is not the best team in the group. I'm just saying that you solve all of the equations, England's going to come out second. Wales will put up a fight and beat England. That's why the US will be first. And Iran is going to give the US a frustrating draw or a loss. I don't know. I just think that you solve for all the rivalries. This is just what you end up with. Group C. Argentina will top the group, obviously. Poland doesn't have a chance to choke because Mexico will implode. But they won't implode so hard that they'll finish below Saudi Arabia because, I mean, you know. Group D. Denmark takes this group by storm. France gets rushed by Australia in the first game, gets frustrated, and implodes afterwards, allowing the Aussies through. Tunisia was also there. Group E. Spain tops the group, probably on goal differential. Germany obviously gets out. Japan will get their win against Costa Rica, though. Group F. Belgium will beat Canada in the first group stage game, but Canada will get out of the group. That means Croatia will finish third, and Morocco is going to have to think about what they learned about making sure to have players who are fully committed to the team. Group G. Brazil is an obvious choice here in this group, but this time Serbia finishes ahead of Switzerland. And Cameroon was here. Group H. Portugal benches Ronaldo in the second half of the first game and don't look back. Korea also gets out of this group because of the power of narrative. Uruguay is just not good enough to me for them to finish ahead of Ghana, even if Ghana isn't even that good. Knockout rounds. Round of 16, Netherlands is going to beat England. Australia is going to shock Argentina. I think they're going to jump them real early, and Argentina is going to be real confused. Canada is going to squeak past Spain in a real tight game, 95th minute goal, game winner from Cavani or something. Not Cavani, Cavallini. There we go, Cavallini. A 95th minute goal from Cavallini. Brazil takes out Korea. US makes it past Senegal. Poland outlasts Denmark. Belgium blasts past Germany. And Portugal falls to Serbia. Quarterfinals, Netherlands stops Australia. Canada takes advantage of a tired Brazil team. As I said, if Brazil gives anybody an inch, they're going to take a mile. And Canada's a team that will take a mile if they're offered an inch. It's a perfect storm, boys. US finish off Poland. Belgium rushes Serbia. Semifinals, Canada upsets Netherlands because, you know what? I think that they have, they roll in with so much power, and it's going to go to, extra time. It's going to be, penalties or something, and Canada is going to upset the Netherlands. Belgium repeats history against the US, and we're going to go to the third place game now. The Dutch take out their frustration on the US, and in the finals, Canada topples Belgium. They are the team of destiny. Oh, Canada, I stand on guard for thee. I'm going to say for any sort of awards, the Golden Boot is, I think it's going to go to Romelu Lukaku. I think with the amount of games that I'm going to say Belgium is playing and how goal hungry he usually is, and how I think that the games with Belgium are going to go through, I think he should be in a conversation at the very least. Golden Ball, am I allowed to give this to Milan Borjan? I'm basically saying that Canada is going to grind out games, but they don't really give this to keepers. So if not, then it would probably be Matt de Ligt. Yeah, it's still defensive, but I think the Dutch will be really sound back there and he'll get a goal or two. Anyway, that's it. I gotta head out again. The milk is already bad, so I gotta go get more. It got spoiled on the way here. There's no sponsor for this video, but please give money to my Patreon so that I have more incentive to continue making videos. If I have the money to pay for an editor, then I'm gonna be making so much more videos. As I said, there's some things that I'm working on and it'd be really helpful to be able to pay for them. I gotta find where the nearest Aldi is now, so thank you.